we're going to get to the most exciting part of our agenda today. There is a nationally recognized figure, has been a friend of mine for a long time. He wrote the foreword to my book on public relations. That is probably the least successful of all his writing efforts ever. But unmute, here we go. And he is the author and the originator of the phrase, everything Trump touches dies, which is fantastic. He also wrote a book about the devil and Donald Trump, and you libeled the devil by putting him in the same sentence as Trump, Rick, just so you know that. Many of you saw Rick. He was warming up today on MSNBC before coming here. And Rick has been trying to, he's been very sad lately. Ron DeSantis just dropped out, and Rick has been very upset about that. So
I've spent entire minutes trying to make myself feel better.
Today, it's, there's a lot of local organizations like ours. There's some bigger, there's some smaller, but it's very important that we all stay focused and learn that, this election coming up in 2024 may be the most important in our lifetime. So we wanted to get Rick's thoughts on, we're going to start off on something positive and happy, how Joe Biden can win. And then we'll get Rick's thoughts on, grabbing defeat from the jaws of victory, how Joe Biden can lose. And we want to get Rick's thoughts on that. So let's have a warm welcome for author, political commentator, and all-around great guy, Rick Wilson. Thank you, Rick.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for having me tonight. Thanks to my friend for that very warm introduction. And I want to say that, as a guy who was a Republican political operative from 1988, from a traditional sort of Bush conservative position, the older Bush, who I worked for in '88, I watched the party evolve and evolve and evolve. And in 2015, the moment Trump came down the escalator, something broke inside of me. And I said, this is, the pattern all fit together. And I saw that this was a guy who had such potential for destruction in this country that it was unspeakable, that it was unimaginable. And that, weirdly enough, after all that time in the trenches, it was a calling that I had and a few of my colleagues, Stuart Stevens, Reed Galen, a few others, that we all decided that we had to stop this. We had to fight this guy. And the one thing that we brought to the table was that we fight like Republicans. Brutal, direct, all the time, always on, always in the attack mode, never blinking an eye. When they go low, we go meet them down in the basement with a chainsaw and a tarp. We wanted to make our stand and our statement about the fact that we believed in American democracy, and we believed in this republic, and we believed in the Constitution and the rule of law. And for a while, we all did it in different ways. And I wrote a couple books after Trump was elected, and I did a lot of speaking, a lot of writing. And then in 2019, a group of us got together and formed the Lincoln Project, which coalesced a large number of these ex-Republicans who were going to go after Trump in a way and in a scope that we felt the Biden campaign and the Democrats couldn't do. Now, I tell you this story not just to brag about it, but to offer up to you the idea that novel ways of doing political combat work, and that dedication to staying on message, no matter what, works. We took the skills that the Republican Party taught us as operatives over those years and built a machine that was designed to infuriate, humiliate, and then to defeat Donald Trump. We played our part in 2020. And I will be honest with you, after 2020, I had been in this fight from 2015. I was exhausted. I really desperately wanted to go write more books and watch my kids have my grandkids. And I rebuilt antique airplanes as a hobby. That was what I was going to go do for a while and get out of politics. But January 6th changed it all. And as much as I dislike the idea that this country hangs by a thread sometimes. We saw that day the country hanging by a thread. We saw that day a country where if the mob had taken a wrong turn and found Speaker Pelosi, or frankly, if the mob had taken a wrong turn and found Senator Romney or Mitch McConnell or anyone who isn't a MAGA person, that mob would have killed them. We were so close that day. And I have become friends with Harry Dunn and Mike Fanone and Officer Goodman over the last couple of years. And these men and women on the Capitol Police Force and on the Metro Police Force stood in the breach and saved this country. And I realized watching what was happening that day that the fight wasn't over, that Trump would never give up on this, that he would never stop this attempt to seize power and hold power forever. And, it's easy in American politics to sort of characterize the other side. Oh, you're the fascist, you're the extremist. But Donald Trump really does represent a profoundly dark and dangerous movement in American politics that I think is one that in the beginning, even a lot of Democrats undercounted the danger. They thought, Paul Ryan will keep him under control. Mitch McConnell will go around him. What could really go wrong? Well, we know what could go wrong. 500,000 people dead under Trump's watch from COVID. The laws of this country thrown into a scramble. The foreign policy of this country inverted from everything that Republicans and Democrats had ever believed. Because you know what? As much as JFK and LBJ might have differed from Richard Nixon, and Richard Nixon might have differed from Ford and Carter might have differed from Reagan and Bush might have differed from Clinton, and on and on and on. Not one of them would ever go out and say, hey, that Hitler fellow had a few good points. Or, I love Vladimir Putin. He's my buddy. Or, Kim Jong-un and I exchanged all the best love letters. There was a deep American tradition that Trump affronted and offended at every turn. And January 6th was really the peak of that. So we knew he'd be back. We knew he'd continue this. We knew this would never stop. And that we also knew that the Republican Party was so fallen and broken that you were always going to face Trump again. They want the real thing. They want Trump. It's like there's no market for diet Trump. They want all the sugar, all the preservatives, all the fats, all the chemicals, all the caffeine, all the alcohol. They want it all. And none of these people in this race this year gave them anything even close to that. So we knew this was inevitable, that we'd be where we are today. I could have told you a billion years ago that Ron DeSantis was going to go burn up in the atmosphere. And now we have a race where Nikki Haley and Donald Trump are going to scrap for another week or two, and then it'll be over. Now, how can Joe Biden win against this unified Republican Party, against this message machine that is like nothing else on earth, against all these things stacked up against him? The one thing that Joe Biden has on the affirmative side that Donald Trump could never buy, beg, borrow, or steal is that Joe Biden has a decency and honor and warmth about him as a person, and as a candidate, and as a president. That emotional connection, that Joe Biden is the normal guy in this race, that Joe Biden is not insane, that Joe Biden is not going to rule as a dictator from day one or ever, is a powerful, powerful tool. Why is it powerful? Two reasons. One, because Americans don't want the chaos. They don't want to go back to the craziness. They don't want to go back to the insanity. They don't want to go back to the lunatic, rage tweeting 24 hours a day, which is what Trump offers them. Now, it will be a tight race. It will be a close race. It will be a hard race at every turn. But the first thing Democrats need to start doing is unify. And I mean this from the bottom of my heart. As my dad used to say, even tough love is still love. Many Democrats are not happy with Joe Biden. He hasn't moved fast enough or far enough on Israel, student loan debt, climate, guns, abortion, name any issue under the sun that you want to think about. And I could even agree with you that he has been more incremental. than people would have wanted. He has been slower than people would have wanted. But that is a problem called the best being the enemy of the good. This isn't a race about whether it's Joe Biden or Gavin Newsom or Gretchen Whitmer or anybody else. This is a race that comes down to a brutal single calculus. It is a binary race between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. If you don't love what Joe Biden has done so far, if you're unhappy with Joe Biden as a progressive, and a lot of younger progressives particularly are, my tough love message is shut up, get on board. It's time to get to work. Because the alternate isn't somebody other than Joe Biden who you like. The alternate is the 1,000 years of darkness from Donald Trump. The alternate is that Donald Trump not only will not cancel student loan debt, he's going to do the opposite. He'll reimpose it just for spite. He's not going to speak out about climate change in a way that reverses it or even mitigates it. He's going to go in the opposite direction and rip every single bit of climate change and green energy legislation out of the ground by its roots and kill it. It's not that Biden hasn't, been passionate enough on any other issue that you might want. It's the only game in town. He's the only guy in town. We've got to rally around the president, and we've got to tell that story that you may not think he's perfect. You may not love him. You may not think every part of his administration works the way you want it to work, but the alternative is a nightmare. And I really, really, really am pretty strong with my Democratic friends about this, including some of my progressive friends. And weirdly, I have friends all across the spectrum. But you've got to believe there's one fundamental thing here that will lose this race, and it's the Democratic Party not turning out, not being aggressive enough, not getting people out, and not telling every single member of the Democratic coalition, this is life or death. This is life or death. And in the case of women and trans people and LGBTQ folks, it may well be life and death. That's the stakes here. So discontent has to be put in their back of the consideration pile right now, and unification of every wing of the party needs to happen and happen fast. The second thing they can do to win, and this sounds so simple, but Democrats have trouble taking a victory lap. Traditionally speaking, they have trouble taking a win. When Joe Biden passed the infrastructure bill, the very first ad that came out about the infrastructure bill did not come from the DNC or the Biden super PAC or the Biden campaign or the White House or anybody else. It came from the Lincoln Project, a bunch of asshole ex-Republicans like me who said, hey, we should take a victory. What would we do if this had happened for President Bush or President Reagan or any Republican? We would take credit. So we built an ad that showed how great work Joe Biden and the Democrats had done. And a friend of mine called me from the White House and said, oh my God, I never thought about that. We should have. I said, exactly. Take the win, take victories in hand and run with them. I had a friend who's a climate lobbyist, and she said, well, we didn't get all we wanted out of the Inflation Reduction Act. We only got this much. And what do you think you're going to get from Donald Trump? He's going to put a coal-fired power plant on the National Mall just to piss you off. So the idea that the Democrats need to start taking credit for the economy, they were taking all the blame for it. They might as well take the credit for it on the flip, and start doing it now. And there's an important reason to do it right now. My colleague Joe Trippi has a great theory, and we've been testing it with polling and with some research. Good economic news takes between 3 and 7 months to sink into the voters. We're in about month 4 of good economic news, and we are starting to see it percolating through in people's perception of the economy. Now, it used to be that the economy drove your perception of politics. Now, with many Americans, it's politics drives your perception of the economy. That said, no matter how many scare stories on Fox News they hear, the economy is terrible, the living envy the dead, cannibal mobs roam the streets of New York. If people are really seeing it in terms of job growth, rate cuts, stock market performance, GDP growth, all these metrics, as they start to sink in, That is one of the pathways Joe Biden has to win coming in the fall. And that's a message amplification thing that everybody from the campaign down to the grassroots needs to be pushing. Um, the next thing they can do to win, and this one is, again, it's kind of 101 stuff. Donald Trump gives you a giant pile of material to work with every single day. People always ask me, like, how do you write all those great negative ads against Trump? Like, I turn on Twitter or my television and I see every single day he says something that is an affront to goodness, decency, and the American way. Every single day, the guy is coming to come out there with some slurry of conspiracy theories, cruelty, racism, early stage dementia or late stage syphilis. I don't know, but all of this material Trump hands the Democrats, the Biden folks need to convert faster and more brutally on. Everything Trump says is a projection. Everything he does projects his own insecurities, his own vulnerabilities, his own doubts. So pushing back on all those things, he hands you the sword every day to stick him. So stick him. Final thing on the winning side, and this is again not some like profound insight that I'm having here, is to prevent Democrats from drifting away to a third party. And the third party effort, especially no labels, has been funded by Harlan Crow, who's the sugar daddy of Clarence Thomas, the big Republican financier, and a bunch of other Republican mega donors to split the election. They're going to come in with a moderate Democrat or a soft Republican, and they're going to deliberately try to split the vote and pull voters away from Joe Biden into the third party camp so that Donald Trump wins. That's their theory. That's what their polling shows us. That's what the outcome is inevitably going to be. So preventing a third party drift in Democratic circles is really important. Subtext to that, or sub part of that, is Democrats need to do a better job of understanding that there is a cultural and political difference emerging among African American voters and Latino voters in this country and the traditional Democratic Party. If you assume two things about them, you are going to lose them. One, assuming they are progressive. They are not. They are moderate to conservative Democrats, and socially and behaviorally, they are not progressives. They don't like a lot of the sort of looking down on the unwashed masses and saying, "Oh, well, you have to be with us because of the color of your skin." They need to be sold that Democrats are going to do something for them and with them that matters and makes a difference in their lives. And for a lot of time, for many generations now, they've been hearing a great pitch, but not hearing something real. Do not take them for granted. And they've done that. I will tell you from experience in Florida, 350,000 Puerto Ricans moved to Florida just before 2016. I asked the Hillary Clinton campaign at one point, who do you have on the job to try to persuade them? The first answer I got was, oh, they're automatically with us. Really? Oh, really? And then they got a little nervous and they said, oh, well, we should hire somebody, right? I was like, yeah, you should hire somebody. And then I asked, who did you hire? And it was like, I got the Indiana Jones answer. Who's on the job? Top men. It was always a Potemkin village. And you know what? Hillary Clinton, they tied with Trump with those voters. Rick Scott in 2018 won them. Rick Scott, who was like a guy who makes Ted Cruz look warm and fuzzy and likable. Donald Trump won them in 2020. You know why? Because Democrats kept saying, well, you're Hispanic, you must vote with us. They kept saying to Cuban voters, you're Hispanic, you must vote with us. They are misreading the cultural differences that are emerging more and more starkly between the base of the Democratic Party on the progressive side and a big, important part of the coalition. African American women have saved the Democratic coalition in 2016, 2018, and 2020, and 2022. But African American men are drifting, Hispanic men are drifting, Be careful. That is a real way to lose this election. And you got to talk to them. You got to be real with them. You can't just say, vote for us because you're the color of your skin. It has gotten to the point where our research is showing us that's the way the Trump campaign and the MAGAs and the Republicans are breaking them off. They're saying, the Democrats don't like you. They just use you. They don't listen to you. We'll listen to you. What do you want to talk about? Even though the party is run by a bunch of flaming racists like Stephen Miller and Steve Bannon, that's a very important thing to know and a very important thing to understand. So it's 6 o'clock. I've talked about how Biden can win and a little bit about how Biden can lose. But if you guys want to, we can just jump right to Q&A and go from here, because I think that's always more valuable. I love a conversation.
Great. Thank you very much, Rick. How about a hand for Rick Wilson? That was fantastic. I'm now writing a book about what Rick Wilson has said. I've been putting it all down. We're first going to start with questions from the room, and then we'll go to the Zoom questions. So for the people that actually came here today, and if you just want to raise your hand and ask the question, then I'll relay it to Rick. Anyone in the room have a question? Yeah, you, sir. I'm sorry, did you raise your hand?
Yeah, actually, I do have a
Good,
question.
sure.
What's the impact of the war in Gaza on the Democratic Party and the outlook of the Democrats in the election?
What is the impact of the war on Gaza, and how is that going to affect the impact for the Democrats for this election year?
Well, it's not a war on Gaza. It's a war on Hamas, just to be, direct about it. And most of America thinks Biden's doing the right thing. And if you try to litigate that, I don't know that you gain a lot out of it in terms of anything but depressing Democratic voter turnout. I also believe that, and I know this, that Americans have unbelievably short political memories, and the coverage has already dropped off about 75% from the initial bump, and it is becoming less and less part of the public dialogue. But this is, most Americans that Biden needs to win over are not going to be in a frame where if it sounds like you're pro-Hamas, they're going to listen. And I know that there's a distinction and a difference, but it's not a war on Gaza. It's a war on Hamas. And I think it would be smart politics when you're talking to the broad swath of American voters to contextualize it properly, because most American voters, including a plurality of Republicans right now, think Biden's handling the war on Hamas appropriately. He's been tough on Israel. He has been tough on the hostage issue. And I think as a foreign policy president, Democrats underscore the importance of being seen as a steady foreign policy president. I think it's probably better for Democrats to let Biden govern and lead on this. Because look, I tried to beat Bibi in 2021. And we knew how dangerous he was, and by no means a Netanyahu apologist, but the politics of that are different here in the U.S. So that's my thought on that.
Great. Yes, sir. Let me just get this gentleman right here, then we'll go to Steve. Go ahead, sir.
And they can do whatever they want. Biden has been tough rhetorically, and I'm sure probably in private. But unless Biden says this wanton cruelty has to stop. I just, well, I'm not young, but I know that young people
sure.
really.
Okay. This gentleman says young people really resent that, in his words, that Israel is dictating to the U.S., Israel can do whatever they want, and we keep giving them money, and that young people seem to really resent this. So, Rick, your thoughts on that?
Look, this is a question that has divided the left significantly, and it will be simplified down in the general election to this. If Joe Biden takes his critiques and his pushback on Netanyahu public and makes it a big deal, I promise you what you will see are thousands of TV advertisements of Donald Trump saying, Joe Biden's abandoning our friends in Israel and and the Jews will be slaughtered. And I'm sorry, I get that this is a thing that has motivated a lot of Democrats very passionately and young voters very passionately. But I also know from a lot of polling out there that young voters are much more concerned about college loans, the economy, jobs, and climate than they are about Israel. It's a low scoring issue on the most important problem panel set of questions. And anecdotally, of course, it's noisy, it's big, it's sexy, it's a place where the Democrats are divided, so people are paying attention to it. But again, I talk to you in this because this race will be won or lost, not in California or New York or Texas. It will be won or lost in Arizona, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia. Now, if you look at those states, you are going to find they're significantly more conservative, even the Democrats in those states, on Israel and foreign policy questions. So that's my take on that. I'm sorry I'm not giving you the answer you probably want, but I only tell you the real thing.
Susan.
We'll go with Steve.
Steve, you were first. Stephen Goldsmith, you have a question. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, well, I think the problem is which Democrats Gaza affects. And I think for the 100,000 casualties, they would say it's a war on Gaza and also Hamas. But it isn't, what needs to happen is a ceasefire, and as soon as possible. Or Joe Biden is going to be like Lyndon Johnson, a great president whose presidency was destroyed by killing a lot of people. And maybe because I lived through that, and I saw it happen to Johnson, and then we got stuck with Nixon because people thought that Humphrey was, had still stayed with the war. So I think staying with this war, whatever it's called, is disastrous for that portion of people. I spent a lot of time phone banking, and from what I understand, in the 2000, the phone banking and door to door, the ground game, shall we call it, accounts for 3 or 4%. And that could be very decisive because those folks will sit at home if this war continues.
Great. Thank you, Stephen. Rick, go ahead.
I get it, but I'm going to be very direct with you. The people you're talking to are not where we are seeing the polling numbers in any of the swing states. In the swing states, they're not with you guys. I'm sorry. I'm just giving you the honest, blunt, direct truth. They're not with you in the swing states. Democrats in Ohio, Democrats in Pennsylvania, Democrats in Wisconsin, Democrats in Michigan, Democrats in Arizona are not as far to the left on this issue as a lot of people that you guys probably know. And it doesn't make you wrong. It just makes the politics what they are. I will also say this. Joe Biden has been a strong foreign policy president. The bulk of the country still agrees with him on this. Look, that can change. But the alternative, once again, if you guys want to see you guys want to see Gaza turned into a parking lot, elect Donald Trump. Stay home and hate Joe Biden for doing this and elect Donald Trump. Because I promise you, he will say to Bibi Netanyahu that day, what do you want? You want nukes? You got nukes. What do you want? He will go as far over to the end of the line as you can possibly imagine. You're unhappy with Biden, but you will get the apocalypse with Trump. I know you're not happy about this issue. I get it. I understand it. I sympathize with it. No one wants to see civilian casualties. No one. But we're in a situation where your choices are not the Joe Biden being replaced by Gandhi. It's Joe Biden being replaced by a guy who literally will jump on board with whatever Bibi wants in that fight. So it's a tough question.
Great. Yes, ma'am, you had a question? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's so easy for Democrats to basically hate Trump. I mean, we see him in the debates every single day. What would you say to how can we begin to reframe that? So we start talking positively about what Biden is doing rather than negatively about what Trump is doing.
Great question, Rick. It's easy for Democrats to hate Trump, but how do we talk about the positives that Joe Biden has accomplished?
Well, I kind of touched on that toward the end of my initial remarks, which is you have to be able to go out and say to your friends who are on Facebook or wherever else, listen, the economy is not on Fox News. It's in the real world. You know it's better. You have to assert to people. You can't be defensive about it. You have to assert it. This economy is great. It is better by the numbers than Donald Trump ever had. Even if you factor COVID, it's better than Donald Trump ever had. This economy is producing jobs. It is raising salaries. It is expanding opportunity. And again, Democrats don't want to take a win. They don't want to brag about it. They don't want to do a victory lap. They should be out there about this economy because it's going to get better, not worse, in the coming months. They should be taking credit for it. Why is it that Republicans who vote against infrastructure bills show up for the ribbon cutting? They want credit. They will take credit shamelessly. They'll even take the hit in the media when people say, oh, how dare you? Oh, you didn't sign this bill, but you're here. Democrats need to learn that lesson. You've got to talk up the economy. And Americans vote a lot of the time for optimism. They vote a lot of the time for the candidate who has who comes across as more prospective, optimistic, happy. The happy warrior thing is a real thing.
Great. You had a question?
Yes, as a follower and supporter of the Lincoln Project since your inception, my question is, to what extent are you working with the DNC and the Biden-Harris re-election committee to use some of your tactics, if not all of them, because I think they're wonderful, to fight fire with fire?
Rick, how are you using your tactics to fight fire with fire? And are you working with the DNC and the Biden-Harris re-election campaign?
Well, as a 527 super PAC, we cannot talk to the Biden campaign. So that's legally forbidden. So we don't do that. We have good relations with the White House and the DNC, but we don't work with them side by side every day. We're open. Look, as we always say, we're all trying to pull the oar and move this boat in the same direction. We're open to working with anybody of goodwill who's willing to stand up for American democracy and beat Donald Trump. So, there is a little bit of not invented here syndrome from time to time, but and not everybody wants or should take our approach. It doesn't apply universally. What does apply universally is the relentless discipline towards message, the ability and desire to go in and reset the public narrative that a lot of Democrats just don't want to do. They want to argue policy with the other side, and we recognize that Republicans aren't talking about policy. They're talking about emotion. They're talking about connection. They're talking about social drivers in the lives of people. And ironically, you had a great Democratic president who did not run on policy just recently. His name was Barack Obama. He had two policies. You saw them all the time: hope, change. He wasn't every day on the stump going through, here's page 615 of my climate plan. He talked about big, evocative, optimistic ideas about America that was inclusive and moving forward and had a future ahead of it. And a lot of that is really something I think Democrats need to latch onto.
Great. For online, Susan, a good learner, you have your hand raised up for a question. Susan, do you have a question?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
So Rick, we're in California. California's going to go for Biden.
Sure.
What do you think are the top 2 or 3 things Democratic activists in California can do to get Biden elected and flip the House? But number 1, get Biden elected.
And flip the House. That's a good one, actually. If flipping the House, you guys have a handful of Republican marginal seats in California. I think you really should focus on those. You want to spoil Donald Trump's day if he even wins this race, you hand him a Democratic majority in the House and hold the line. Amazing, right? Now, I will say this. If you are doing volunteering, postcarding, phone calls, text banking, anything else, Arizona, Arizona, followed by Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. If you can do those, if you're reaching into those states and the campaign and the DNC have some outreach tools in that regard, if you're doing grassroots stuff, those are the states I encourage you to focus on most heavily. I would also encourage you to focus on a few other races that are going to emerge. We don't know which ones they're going to all be yet. Secretaries of state races anywhere, Democrats need to lay in on those as hard as possible, because Republicans are basically running to say, I don't care what the vote count is, I'm going to put Trump in office. So, but number one is like, work the numbers in California. If you can support any of those House seats, and I can give you a list of them later, those marginal Republican House seats that you could flip them, move them, push them hard.
Great, thank you. Larry, you had a question?
My question is, why do so many people believe Donald Trump's, nonstop lies?
Why do so many people believe Donald Trump's nonstop lies?
Because about 75 million Americans subscribe to Fox News and listen to it as their primary news source, and about 150 million Americans list Facebook as their number one online news source. And there is a hermetically sealed, separate universe of media that says, well, yes, Donald Trump invented cheese. Yes, Donald Trump is 6'7", 215 pounds. All these lies they hear, and their brain goes, maybe that's a lie. And then they are told over and over again, no, it's true. There's a reinforcing ecosystem of media on the MAGA right that is relentlessly funded. It is powerful. It has enormous reach and scope and influence. It is the single most powerful normative force in American politics. There's nothing like it on the left. Republicans will go, oh, MSNBC. Not even close to the ability to influence the Republicans' message discipline every day. That's why they believe the lies.
Oh, we have several on. Who do we have online? The question. Which one is that? What question? I can't see the messages. Yeah.
Okay, so just going with online, Ann Stahl is asking, do you have any prediction about whether the Republican Party will survive Trump and MAGA? And if it dies, what might arise in its place for true conservatives?
It's already dead. It died already. It died sometime in 2020. And what you have now is, those nature shows where the wasp lands on the back of a roach and it shoots its seed, or it shoots its eggs into the roach's back. It like takes over. It's like a parasite. Trumpism is a parasite that crawled in the Republican Party, ate it from the inside out, and it kept all the branding and the logos, but it doesn't believe in anything conservative anymore. They believe in a maximalist approach to the use of state power. They believe in the weaponized application of violence in politics. All the things they believe in now are things that, guys like me, look, I'm 60 years old this year. I've been in politics my entire life. Like from the time I was like just into college. I've been in campaigns my whole life. Nothing the Republican Party believes today as a cult matches up with what we used to say the Republican Party believed in. And the death of the party, the time of death was running down the elevator in 2015. The moment it was declared was January 6th, when he launched an attack on a free and fair election. There's nothing left of a party that backs him after that. They're all either there for ambition or fear or venality, but there's no party there. Do I think America needs a new political party? I do. I think a center-right party based on free market principles and limited government and adherence to the rule of law and the Constitution would be a remarkable thing. I think it would be a remarkable thing. The country needs a dynamism. I don't believe in one-party states, left or right. And you guys in California, your politics and your state, it would be much more vibrant in a way if you had to fight a little harder. if you had to go out and run real elections in most seats in the state. And I can say the same thing on the opposite tick about Florida. This would be a better state if the Democrats were more competitive here. Because I believe that American political dynamism matters. It matters that you have to fight for an idea or an issue. Compromise is not a dirty word in politics. It's what the founders really intended, is that there would be a dynamic interplay between political forces, and they would come to conclusions that serve the people. And today's MAGA party doesn't believe in any of that. They want to destroy all of us. But I do think a center-right party, I think we need a vibrant party system in this country that reflects a lot of different ideas and ideals from across the world, across the country.
That's great. Sir, you had a question? Yes, your hand raised.
Yeah, related to what you were talking about, I mean, I'm just wondering if maybe as a nation, we may be transitioning into a system where we didn't start out as a two-party system. We didn't even start out having parties, but that we may be going through a very difficult birthing process into a new political dynamic where one party may be the answer to things.
This gentleman said, are we going to where one party will be the answer to things?
Maybe an answer, but it's not a good answer.
Yeah.
And it is, look, there is a narrow window here where American democracy and the American republic can be preserved. And unless we defeat Donald Trump in the fall, that window closes. I will tell you something about my old party. They are relentless. They never quit. They never stop working. They have no shame. They will do or say anything to win. They will lie constantly to win. And you know what? I got a lesson one time from a guy I used to work for named Lee Atwater. I know that name probably sends shivers up your spines, and you think, oh my God, how hateful, what a horrible one. Lee had and Lee was a guy who had a deathbed conversion, but he one time said to me and a group of other guys who were young guys, we were all like the young, like hard hitters in the campaign. And somebody says, oh, is that too negative? And he goes, well, you know what? You can wake up if you're in a campaign that's too negative and you feel like a scumbag, but you might end up with the honorable in front of the scumbag in your name. And that's a lot better place to end up. Democrats want to feel good about others and themselves, and Republicans want to win. They don't care what it takes to get there. We grow up in Republican campaign circles with only two lessons. Two lessons are beaten into your head from the first day when you're a young Republican campaigner. Just win, baby, is rule one. Rule two is stay on message. If you have a question about either rule, consult the other rule. That's the Republican ethos. And that is, I get how dangerous it is, but don't bring a knife to a gunfight.
Yeah. We have a question about the immigration, whether it's a crisis or the border crisis, the border situation. Will the GOP use that successfully to help them win some races or to help them Trump win the election?
Look, just like John Fetterman has realized, and like we talked about earlier with the Israel-Hamas situation, America is not where California is on immigration. You know some of the most passionate opponents to immigration reform in the state of Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley? First and second generation people who have been naturalized as American citizens. They want to close the door behind them. There's a reason scare tactics work, is because they scare people. And there is a sense with many Americans, and by the way, I've written extensively about this subject, and I am a deep, fundamental, profound believer in immigration. When my family came here from Germany in the 1820s, they were the scum of the earth, followed by, later, the Irish scum of the earth, and then the Italian scum of the earth, and the Jewish scum of the earth, and so on, Vietnamese scum of the earth, and on and on and on. It's always the pattern in this country. And the idea that we're a propositional nation, that you're not an American because of your blood or where you were born or with the soil you were rooted from, I think is America's greatest gift to the world. I think it has always been our greatest gift to the world. There is a sense, though, that we've made the border too easy, and I know, and believe me, I'm with you. The stories of people crossing the border are tragic and horrifying and cruel. And there's a problem with that, is that there's a market for that. And it's not just MAGA Republicans. And I hate saying it, but it's true. You want to know why they're going to hold Texas until the sun cools? Because that issue drives people who are not the voters you would expect that it drives. Arizona, New Mexico, similar issue. In California, if the Republicans ever stage a comeback, it'll be on that subject. They'll use that and find a way to do it. And Americans are afraid of that. And there's a vast, colossal propaganda mechanism to make them more afraid of it. The Fox Caravan Report, all those things that never end. And again, you can't argue policy when emotion is on the table. And look, Biden has a better border security record than Donald Trump did, but no one would know that. And the idea of the propositional nation has slipped a little bit in our public consciousness, and is in part important for Joe Biden to sell that again. But this is not a simple issue. It is not a straight line issue. And while Donald Trump and the kids in cages was a big one in 2018, it's not the same place that it was back then. I would be very careful in how you phrase and message and communicate on the border question.
Great. Sir, you had a question, and then you'll be next. We go to you, and then online, and then you, sir. Okay, go ahead, please.
How should Biden fight head on the perception that he's too old? Like, should he do like a TikTok of him doing wheelies or something?
Yes.
Or
Yes.
a meme or something?
How should Biden combat the perception that he's too old? Should he do like more bike riding or doing wheelies on TikTok or anything like that?
He should let Donald Trump keep talking. Joe Biden put out a tweet today. Like, I don't get along with Nikki Haley on most things, but we can both tell that she's not Nancy Pelosi. Donald Trump's mental acuity, guys, is all over the board. Now, I got this for y'all. Don't worry. I will be wrecking Trump on the age issue as we go forward. Look up 2 ads we just did recently about Trump from the Lincoln Project. One's called Senile and one's called Feeble. I guarantee you, we will be hitting that hard. And the fact of the matter is, he's only a couple years younger than Biden. And if you want to lock this race down to its fundamentals, old and evil versus old and good. I'll take old and good every time.
All right. We have a question online. What is the impact of Kamala Harris? Is she a good vice president? Does she help or hurt Biden? Is that an issue for 2024?
It's an issue. She's never quite gotten, I think, a fair shake. And I say that having watched a lot of like major Democratic donors I talk to just don't like her. A lot of people don't like her. I think it's misplaced. I think she's doing better. I think the fact that she's working on choice and younger voters as her key issues is a good use of her time, presentation, and personality. And I'm curious to see who Trump names as his VP pick, because that's, the vice president choice matters only 3 times: the day they're chosen, the day they're introduced, and the day they have their one debate. Harris did not fail any of those things in 2020. But Trump's nominee for VP has the chance to fail all those. I give Harris pretty good odds on her debates. She's smart. She's fast on her feet. She is not a consistent hitter, but, she's like a 125 hitter, but, weirdly, she comes in occasionally and like grand slam out of the park. So, e.g., 2020 when she cleaned Biden's clock one day, and I don't think he ever forgot that. When she hits it, man, she is on task.
Okay, great, sir. You had a question?
the Republicans can do that the Democrats can't. And that is appeal to the independents. For one thing, Trump's cabinet members are all on record individually as criticizing him and saying he should never be allowed near the White House again. Why can't you get those people who are Republicans and state that more strongly for the independents?
Great. A question for the independents, Rick. This gentleman says that a lot of Trump's former cabinet members have said that Trump is an idiot, he's not qualified, those sorts of things. Could the Lincoln Project interview them or use them for your ads to talk about how unfit Trump is?
Well, we did that in 2020 with a lot of quotes. And look, my first book, I talked to a lot of cabinet members off the record in my first book. A lot of them. You'll figure it out if you reread it. You'll know who I'm talking to. It's not subtle, but they were off the record. Many of them are now on the record. But I have some really bad news for you. We tested it. It doesn't work. It doesn't move independents. It doesn't move soft Republicans like we tend to target. It doesn't move anybody. The only people it convinces are moderate Democrats, which is not the worst thing in the world, but it won't move the MAGAs or soft Republicans. It just doesn't work. You could try to focus group your way into finding a secret sauce, and that ain't it.
Okay, Rick, we have another question from our live. Oh, two more questions. You'll be next, sir. Go ahead.
How big is the Lincoln Project in terms of people and dollars?
How big is the Lincoln Project in terms of people and dollars? And we don't need to borrow any of that, Rick, but whatever you want to say.
Well, here's the size of the Lincoln Project. The internal staff number is, we have a head count of 24 right now, 23 or 24 right now, who are the staff of the Lincoln Project who work in the creative department, which I head, the operations department, which Jeff Timmer heads, staff, including press, the political office, which devises all of our voter contact data and planning and polling. And we have the union, which is a volunteer outreach organization inside the Lincoln Project, which has about 72,000 grassroots members out in the country. They do calling, phone banking, all that stuff. Our budget this year is about $50 million. We raised about 100 in 2020, but we are now running a very narrowly focused campaign on these electoral college states because the environment has changed radically since 2020, and we didn't know who Trump was going to be up against in 2020. We do now. So we think we can do this job for about $50 million this cycle. We're on track to raise that. It's early in the year, but we feel like we're on track to raise that. And it's going to be a brutal contest all the way down.
A question online was, who are you trying to reach with the Lincoln Project? Is it Trump voters? Is it independents?
No.
Is it young people?
I will tell you very specifically. We reach what is called the Bannon line. Now, Steve Bannon named the Bannon line for us, and not that he likes us or vice versa, but in 2020, he said, if these guys, they're tough, smart guys, they can get 3%, Trump can't win. And I said, hold my beer. In 2020, depending on the state, it was between 3 and 8% of the Republicans that we needed to convert. And we ended up, if you average it out on our states, about 4.63%. We did really well. And that made the winning difference in places like Wisconsin and places like Georgia. I don't like to thank Donald Trump for anything ever, but I want to thank him for the Dobbs decision, because now the voter pool in those states is between 7 and 11% of the Republican voters. Now, when I say Republican voters, who are they? They tend to be suburban. They tend to be more educated. There's about a 60% chance they have a college degree and about a 30% chance they have an advanced degree of some kind. They tend to be families with 2 children. They tend to live, again, in more affluent suburbs. Their income levels are a little higher. They also include a group of independent men who are functionally Republicans. They're registered independent, but they vote Republican in everything. those guys have been a really interesting source of expansion for us in the last period, because we're what they call Dobbs dads. Many of those folks in that cohort have daughters between the age of 10 and 25. And they look at Dobbs and they say, oh shit, if my 10-year-old girl gets pregnant, she has to either die or bear a child. What the hell? So Dobbs has really changed the ball game with a lot of our voting pool. The other two issues that have changed the ball game with our voter pool, January 6th, because these voters do not like the chaos, they don't like the crime, they don't like the violence, they don't like the screaming, they don't like the crazy talk. And there's another element, the emergence of Trump as this sort of evangelical saint, the emergence of the MAGA church militant, that puts off a lot of our voter pool as well. So we're going to go out in the target states. And again, I don't have to go to Wisconsin and win 1 million voters. I have to go to Wisconsin and pick and choose and win 300,000 voters, which we proved when we did it in 2022 that we know how to do. We won 17 of our 22 targeted races in 2022, including being able to hold on to Tony Evers as governor of Wisconsin, which if we had lost that, the consequences would have been cataclysmic for this year. So we know how to model those things. And one other thing that's driving our voters is Ukraine, because you don't expect it. Weirdly, the winning ads in Wisconsin that we hit a whole bunch of households with in the end of the election were saying to Wisconsin voters, if Putin wins in Ukraine, the Republicans win, Putin wins. You know why we did that? Because our research director and our chief numbers guy went out and said, we've identified about 500,000 households in Wisconsin that are first or second generation Polish, Ukrainian, Latvian, Lithuanian, or Estonian. And it scared the hell out of them. So we're very good at like picking out we play what we call the game of small numbers. So that's a lot of where our audience is in the coming election. We also occasionally, like in 2020, we got a call from a group of Black reverends in Metro Philly. And they said, hey, we can't get the White House to call us back. We can't get the DNC to call us back. We can't get the Bidens to call us back. We need some money for turnout. And we said, we don't know how to do turnout in Philadelphia. We're a bunch of Republicans. They said, well, we do. We have a plan. Here it is. And Reed Galen, my colleague, said, where do we wire the money? So occasionally we'll go into places that we see a need that is a swing state, a swing area, that can make a real difference, and we'll go ahead and drop into something like that. But that's not our primary thing. And we may do some Gen Z stuff, but that's still sort of up in the air.
Great. The gentleman over there with the hat, yes, sir.
With the nice green hat.
Exactly. Yes.
Can you help me understand the Republican association with Putin, Kim Jong-un, Hitler, white supremacy, this association with authoritarians, insurrection, and how is it that Iowan Christians can turn a blind eye to 90 indictments? I can't understand.
Yeah, Rick, what is the Republican obsession with Hitler, Putin, Kim Jong-un, authoritarianism, and white supremacy? Yeah,
they've given up on democracy. They want a shortcut to their ideological fantasy land. They want the man on the horse. This is there are a lot of great writers on this, and Hannah Arendt, and Heather Cox Richardson and Ruth Ben-Ghiat, a whole bunch of other people have written about the desire of people to have an authoritarian leader, a strong man, the man on the horse, the guy who will blow through all the trivialities and obsessions of small d democracy in order to bring you the promised land. Psychologically, humans are kind of wired for that. They like it. And that's some really like long haul anthropological characteristics of just people. But it is not something you can underestimate And look, we have now watched the Republican Party mainstream Hitler. You got Moms for Liberty out there talking, approvingly quoting Hitler on education. And once you look, there's no like just the tip on Hitler. Once you're pro-Hitler, you're not in the American political dialogue as I know it. And you're once you're pro-Hitler, I'm coming for you. So we as a country have a lot to address about the lack of civic education in this nation. And again, every single American president from FDR, every single one of them, whether it was somebody as conservative as Ronald Reagan or as liberal as Barack Obama, none of them were fans of Adolf Hitler. None of them thought, oh, a little fascism will be okay. But the Republican Party is psychologically broken. It's not what it was. It's not about tax cuts anymore or any of that stuff. It is about the raw exercise of power, and only a dictator can do that.
Rick, speaking of January 6th, one of our favorite topics, there are still a lot of Congress people who had tours on January 5th who denied, after running for their lives, denied January 6th was anything but a peaceful tourist visit. My personal view is Merrick Garland has done nothing about this, but we'll talk about that later. But what are we going to do about the Congress people? Ted Cruz, we're talking about you, Josh Hawley, and Elise Stefanik, some of the others. What are we going to do about some of them that actively aided and assisted for January 6th? And
look, Josh Hawley, Ted Cruz, Tommy Tuberville, Rick Scott, Tom Cotton, Mike Lee, Cindy Hyde-Smith. I could go through the rest of the list, but they were not waiting around in the Senate. They were not delaying the Senate that day. They were in the morning before the attack, remember. They were delaying the process. They weren't delaying the process because they knew what was going to happen. They were delaying the process because they wanted the process to be thrown off the tracks. They wanted the attack. I think that one of the failures we've had in the January 6th committee, God bless Liz and Adam, they did a great job. God bless Jerry Nadler and Jamie Raskin, they did a great job. But they didn't do the whole job. And they couldn't go after the people in Congress, in the Senate, and the House who were involved in the promotion and the planning of this attack. And if you do not punish a coup, it is a training exercise. We have not yet seen from the Justice Department a commitment to put the planners and plotters at a senior level in jail. Now, Jack Smith's case is a big, powerful case, but the fact of the matter is, we all know something. In about 36 hours, Donald Trump will be the Republican nominee. And you know what Merrick Garland's going to do? Going to call Jack Smith and go, wrap it up. We're done. We're done. He's the presidential nominee. We can't do it anymore. We got to stop. Nobody wants to ever believe that the president is above the rule of law. But right now he is, because they waited too long to do this. They should have brought charges in the first week of the Biden administration. They should have hammered Donald Trump starting the day that they took office. He should have called Merrick Garland and said, special prosecutor, sounds like a good idea to me. And Merrick Garland should have had the guts and the heart and the balls to go out and do it. Because right now, Donald Trump is going to get off of the documents case because the judge is in his pocket, and the jury pool there that's a 65% MAGA county. Okay. He is net. The New York case is just about money. And at the end of the day, money is boring. The Georgia case is not as good as you think it is. The Jack Smith case will be pulled off. I have told people for a year, do not count on legal miracles to take out Donald Trump. He must be beaten at the ballot box. He must be beaten so hard that the MAGA movement breaks and he dies of an aneurysm and shame. There's no substitute for beating his ass in the election. And there are no miracles in this world. And anybody who's followed along for the last few years knows Trump has the luck of the devil. And I've told you from the beginning, do not count your chickens that Donald Trump being indicted for felonies or even being convicted of felonies will change the outcome of this election. It doesn't matter to his base at all.
Is Merrick Garland compromised, or is he just weak?
Weak.
Okay,
Just
very
weak.
good. Just weak.
He's an institutionalist.
Got it. We have a question from online. Rick, I think we only have time for one more question after this.
Yeah.
We're going to be very sensitive with your time, but
Thank you.
someone said, what do we have to do to get rid of the electoral college? Is that even
Can't.
possible?
Just don't even try. Stop wasting your time. It's not going to work. It's a great idea, but it's not going to work. And I'll tell you why. It's in the Constitution. It's hardwired in the Constitution. It's not going to. There is no Supreme Court for the next 100 years that's going to change that. And the National Vote Compact is not going to change that, because you know what? That's not in the Constitution. And the constitutional basis of it, I don't even think a Supreme Court with a much more moderate composition would undo the Electoral College. It is a fundamental feature of federalism. And there's no shortcut. Democrats have to be better at fighting, better at winning, better at communicating, better at convincing people that they make sense emotionally, socially, politically, economically, and all these other spectra. Don't think there's a cheat code in American politics by getting rid of the Electoral College. It's not going to work.
Okay, great. I believe we have time for maybe one more question. Go right ahead, ma'am.
There's an indication that the supporters of Obama and also some of the younger people are not supporting Biden. If you believe this to be true, why and what can we do to get them to support Biden?
This woman has asked, there's a belief that supporters of Biden, and I'm sorry, supporters of Obama and young people are not supporting Biden. If that is the case, what can we do?
Well, those indications are largely anecdotal. I will say this to take your mind away from some of the young people worries right now. There have been some fairly low quality surveys that indicated that. And by fairly low quality, I mean, when you've got a survey like Siena, which is a good to decent to good pollster, and they come out and say, oh, 18 to 30 or 18 to 29s, don't like Joe Biden. And they're doing a 1,600 national sample. You're basically ended up interviewing like 90 young voters. So there's a fairly low quality polling set out there on young voters. I know some people that are doing some better quality survey work on it that are in the field now. But look, at the end of the day, you have to make this a race against Trump versus Biden. You can bring a lot of those young voters home by showing them what Trump is and who he is, and letting Trump show them who he is as well. So, but again, part of what your question expresses is what I've talked about a little bit earlier. Do not assume that any group, and Democrats have long done this. I've seen it. And look, I engineered a big chunk of the takeover of the Florida Republican Party when I was still a Republican, takeover of the Florida political landscape. I did it in Wisconsin. I did it in other places too. We went out and found groups that you took for granted. Democrats took groups for granted. Democrats used to assume across the Deep South that farmers were yellow dog Democrats. They'd vote for a yellow dog, or they'd vote for a yellow dog before they vote for a Republican. Okay. We went out and said to them, Democrats ignore you. They don't listen to you about your religious life or your guns, and come over here. Democrats were shocked that it happened, but it was a plan. It was a program. Republicans are not stupid. Remember this. One thing about Republican operators you have to always keep in mind, they're not stupid. A lot of these MAGA voters may trick you into thinking the whole party is stupid. There are guys who are geniuses. All day long, all they think about is how to screw you guys over. And all day long, all they think about is how to peel off one little group at a time from your coalition until you don't have a coalition anymore. And I one of the things that you asked earlier about, does the Lincoln Project, operate with the DNC or anything? Not all the time. We're coordinated, but we're not locked together. But what we do is open. We tell people exactly how we do everything that we do. We're completely transparent about our work, about what we're doing. I will put up an ad and say, this ad is to move this group of voters, and here's why, and here's how it works, and here's what we're doing. It's we put the recipe out there every day. Speak from conviction. Talk to Americans at an emotional level. Connect with them on real things. Don't be afraid to be funny. Don't be afraid to be emotional. Don't be afraid to be transgressive. Don't be afraid in general. We're wide open. We're open source politics in the Lincoln Project. We want you to know how we do what we do because we think it'll help you win. So,
last question, Rick, and I promise this is the last one. Will
okay.
Liz Cheney have any bearing on the upcoming election?
I predict Liz Cheney will stalk the country with a baseball bat covered in barbed wire and will bash Donald Trump every single day with that baseball bat because Liz believes in something that Donald Trump doesn't. And you guys could disagree with her on every single ideological perspective in the world. She believes in America. She believes in the rule of law. She believes in the Constitution. She believes that everybody has to play by the rules. And as a guy who used to work for Dick Cheney when he was Secretary of Defense, I can tell you that is a family that doesn't F around. She means it. She's going to go after Trump. She's going to make the case that no Republican of good faith can vote for the guy. I think she'll be tremendously effective in the coming year.
Well, Rick, final thoughts. And I'm pretty soon going to get a Palos Verdes Democrats a board member T-shirt. And I think we're all going to vote now to give you that T-shirt, Rick, if you will proudly wear it. And be a member of the Palos Verdes Democrats just for this year. What do you think, Rick?
I mean, I got a full-time job, but I'm always here for you.
Excellent. Ladies and gentlemen, how about a big hand for Rick Wilson? Rick, thank you so much. We are just beyond honored that you could join us.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great night. See you soon.
Okay, thank you.